and welcome to the College Chaps podcast. On this episode, we're going to talk to our guest about what is turning into a college football revolution in Lubbock with Texas Tech. But first, we're the Chaps, and I'm joined by the greatest authority on the college game this side of the Cumberland Gap. Oliver, how are you, my friend?
I'm all right, George. Yeah, not bad. These introductions are getting better week by week. I cannot wait until I'm not going to say I can't wait till week 14 because that's ridiculous. I don't want the college football season to just be going like that. But they are getting better every week. I'm very excited that college football's getting nearer as well.
We're nearly there. I think I may have exhausted my introductions. Our guest makes his second appearance with the Chaps, and since our last chat, has become the national college football writer for CBS Sports, and recently awarded the Football Writers Association of America Rising Star Award, which is just an awesome accolade to get. We've asked him back to talk about an awesome piece he wrote about the new revolution happening in Lubbock, Texas. So it's awesome to welcome back Shehan Jeyarajah. Hi, Shehan, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, you're an award, but you probably were an award-winning journalist before the last time we spoke to you, but you're certainly an award-winning journalist this time. Congratulations on the award, a big, high-profile award to get. Well deserved, I think.
Well, thank you so much. No, it's been a busy few years, I guess, since we've last spoken. But George, I at least got to see you down in Dallas this time last year when you were down at SEC. Missed you out in Atlanta this year, but no, I mean it's been an exciting time, and I can't believe we're all still doing this.
Jehan, we principally listen, we see a lot of your work across social media, but we principally wanted to come back on to talk about the what I call the revolution at Texas Tech. And I know it's been building over a few years, and we'll go on and talk about Cody Campbell a little bit in a second. But I think most people watching or listening to this will have read your piece. But tell us a little bit about how the opportunity came about, and why you wanted to write about Texas Tech.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I did the article essentially in 2 or 3 days. Like it was a very quick piece, but in another sense, it was years in the making. I've known Joey McGuire since he went from high school coach to assistant coach at Baylor. I know a lot of people on that staff and that athletic department. There's a lot of former Baylor staffers on that staff as well. And the other thing too is that I've been around Texas Tech since Cliff Kingsbury was there, for close to a decade at this point, and it's a program that's fascinated me for a long time because it's one of these programs that we think about, like Alabama or Oklahoma, that has this one geographical place that it owns, but unlike those other places, it doesn't come with success. Like you look at Texas Tech, they haven't won an outright conference championship since 1955. It's been that long since they've been relevant. And even if you look, there are 7 power conference schools in Texas right now. All of them have either won a conference championship or played in a major bowl game in the past 5 years. The one exception is Texas Tech. And so it's almost something's been percolating there for such a long time because the interest is there, right? Especially in recent years, the money is there, the investment, the passion, all that stuff is there, but there's no results to show for it. In fact, when they were ranked in the preseason AP Top 25, that was their first time being ranked at all since 2018. And so I think that it makes for such an interesting test case in so many ways of this NIL era. And you look at the way, of course, that they've thrown money around, the way that they've added transfers, identified players that fit their roster at a really high level. I mean, this is their moment. They want to break out of the muck.
Excuse me, Joyce touched on Cody Campbell there, and obviously you mentioned coaching staff. He isn't a member of the coaching staff, but how much do you think that he learned from his time playing there with Mike Leach about how to tackle the evolution that is happening in Lubbock right now?
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned that because so for people who don't know, Cody Campbell was an offensive lineman there from 2001 to 2004 from Canyon, Texas, up in the Panhandle. And for Brits who might not know the geography as well, it's literally the piece of Texas that juts up and is a panhandle. And so it's fascinating because Mike Leach is somebody who thought differently in so many ways and was willing to try different things. And there's this great book that I'd encourage everybody to read called The Perfect Pass by S.C. Gwynn, where he essentially gets into the origins of the air raid offense and how it came to be with Hal Mumme and Mike Leach. But Mike Leach was the guy who popularized it in so many ways. And so Texas Tech is a place largely because of Leach where you just have the license to try things, especially things that deliver results. And, so I know other programs that around the same time with NIL were much more conservative. They didn't want to overstep, they didn't want to be wrong. Well, I think that Cody Campbell comes very much from that opposite tradition of wanting to be aggressive, wanting to act first because maybe opportunity will go away if you don't act first. It's how he built his oil business. He's not somebody who comes from generational oil wealth. He's somebody who was a wildcatter who went out and identified pieces of land to go buy. And in so many ways, I think that that's the mentality that he took forward. And a lot of it just ties back to, I think, Mike Leach and being willing to try things, make things easy, but act aggressively.
I love that. I was going to say analogy, but it's not. It's where he came from. I'm a huge fan of the Paramount series Landman, right? And every time I was reading your article, I was thinking back to there's passages in that drama where that kind of activity is going on. You talked about that kind of moment in time, and Cody Campbell, it comes out in the article, Shehan, that Cody Campbell talks about that there's that almost that window of opportunity which he identifies as here's the potential to go and do something and make a strike effectively. They've certainly taken advantage of that, as you say, through nil and through the transfer portal, and that's where a lot of the buzz around the program has come from. Let's assume that that's going to be a success, and they get success on the back of it, and they live up to the preseason polls. How do they maintain that success and that momentum going forward? Because by that point, the advantage has really kind of played itself out.
Well, there's two ways, and it's a very good question. One, I spoke to Joey McGuire a lot about his 2006 Cedar Hill High School team, and that was the first ever high school team at Cedar Hill to win a single state playoff game, and they went on to go undefeated and win a state championship. This was a place where that had never happened before. And Joey McGuire said when that happened, it made everybody think about the program differently, both externally but internally too. This became the new standard, is that we do that here. So part of it is when you have success to sell, it begets success. That's a big part of why they're trying to own this moment. The other piece too is that even though they don't have the same sort of financial pathways available to them, they're trying to be very aggressive in how they create their roster building strategy. And what I mean by that is it has not been a secret that they've thrown some big money at some high school recruits. In the 2026 class, Felix Ojo, an offensive tackle. In the 2027 class, LaDamian Guyton, a defensive end. By the way, keep in mind what those positions are. They're not quarterbacks or receivers. They're an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman. So they are being very targeted with guys that they feel like are elite players who are relative sure things that can fill a specific role. Because here's the reality too, okay? Let's say that every team is working with a little bit of a different rev share number because different schools are giving certain amount to football and other sports, etc. So let's say that you're working with $15 million, right? Well, in the NFL, if you give an offensive lineman, whatever, 4% of the cap, and he's a good offensive lineman, that's a pretty good deal. If you go out into the transfer market and have to get one, maybe you have to pay him 11% of the cap. Well, that's a much worse deal. So they're betting if we get some of these guys on campus when they're relatively cheaper as high school recruits versus having to go out into the portal and get guys, that ultimately becomes a bargain. So they're trying to be ahead of the curve in that way as well. Now, again, when you're able to add David Bailey from Stanford, who is already likely a first round pick, yeah, that's going to have quicker results. This is more of a long-term investment, and let's make this sustainable over the course of 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's almost a kind of perfect storm of roster construction. I mean, you mentioned David Bailey, but that whole defensive front for this year. You know, Lee Hunter, Skylar Gill Howard out of Northern Illinois. There's so many guys. Romello Height out of Georgia Tech. There's so many guys on that defensive front, and it is those, like you mentioned, the positions, the areas of the football field that aren't particularly traditionally spent a lot of money on. You touched on Felix Ojo there. His signing, the money talked about around that signing, kind of came out around the same sort of time as your article about what's happening in Lubbock. You talked about the Red Raiders being ahead of the curve just then. Do they set the curve from here? Did that move? Does that kind of change the landscape of college football and set how everyone looks at roster construction from here on out?
No, it's a great question, and I think that it's a mixed bag. So I got a chance to talk to Texas Tech staff, and I got a chance to talk to Texas staff about a month ago. And one thing was the reported deal for Felix Ojo. That will actually happen is he's going to be paid around 800K a year over the course of 3 years, right? And so they're willing to pay multi-year contracts. Well, I talked to Texas coach Steve Sarkisian. One thing that he said is we have no interest in giving out multi-year contracts for two reasons. One, it's only binding to us. Like Texas is the only one who's binded by that. A player can still decide to leave and there's no recourse, right? There's not a transfer fee, there's not a buyout, anything like that. And so from their perspective, they're like, this is a bad deal for us. And the second thing, of course, is if a player busts, you don't want to be in a position where a kid hasn't performed and then you still owe him $800,000. So you got to be really targeted with how you do this because the dead money that could come of it is potentially really dangerous. I do think that there are pieces of this strategy though that I'd consider more like middle class teams will use. So for example, right, like I don't know specifics about his NIL situation, but Houston has a player committed, Keyshawn Henderson, who is a top three player, one of the best quarterbacks in the country from the city of Houston who wants to be at Houston. Well, they're probably going to be willing to overpay him a little bit because he means so much to that program. Well, you know, Texas, if they don't land him, they'll just get another five-star quarterback, right? So like the relative value to Houston versus Texas is different. And so, you know, one thing that I've seen is I don't know if this number shifted since then, but at least when Felix Ojo committed, 8 of the top 100 players in the 2026 recruiting class are committed to Big 12 schools. The year before it was two. So you're able to just be more targeted, I think, is the biggest swing. But other teams are going to try different things, right? Like, you know, there are programs like Iowa State, for example, that are maybe they take one swing, but like you're still mostly going to be trying to get that 500 to 600 level recruit and to be locked in for 3 years. It's not going to change what they do, but it at least opens the door, I think, that different types of programs can create different types of recruitment strategies, and we'll see ultimately what pays off in 5 years.
I mean, it's a fascinating subject, and it's going to be incredible to watch how all of this plays out. Because on one hand, maybe the likes of Texas Tech and other schools like that need to give that commitment to a player to attract them to the school. But as you say, there's a lot of kind of winging a prayer in terms of how that plays out, and then the money can get used up very quickly if, as you say, if a player doesn't perform to their kind of their high school ranking. Let's talk a little bit about how Texas Tech might get on this year. As you said at the outset of the show, it's a team which typically has not had success. It's not made the Big 12 championship game at all during its time in the conference. And I think you said 1950 something was the last time there was any kind of measured success. CBS Sports have Texas Tech as having one of the easiest schedules in college football. So how do you think this year plays out for Texas Tech? I know that's an impossible question, Shehan, but we appreciate your candor at that.
Well, it's interesting because last year Texas Tech won, I believe it was 8 games. They had 6 games that were one score wins. Well, the goal of the 2025 team, with the way that they've built in the trenches, is to not be in that many one score games. And their non-conference schedule is maybe the easiest in the country. They get FCS, Kent State, and I believe it's Oregon State, who's greatly diminished, of course. Uh, their home schedule with BYU losing their quarterback all of a sudden looks a whole lot easier. It's really BYU and Kansas are kind of the two tough teams. Ollie, I see you got the Kansas hat on there, but you know they do have three tough road games. They play Kansas State, Arizona State, and Utah, three of the best teams in the Big 12 in road games, and those are legitimately difficult games. But here's the goal ultimately, right? Is let's say that eight of those games that we just mentioned are just non-factors. That like they don't have to try that hard. That they're just wins, right? Well, if you play a four-game season and you go 1-3 in those games, that's 9 wins, right? If you go 2-2 in those games, that's 10 wins and you're probably in Arlington. To me, that is where they should be. I think that not winning 10 would be disappointing with what they've put together. When you talk to them there, and the coolest thing about Texas Tech this year is how little they're shying away from expectations. So many programs are like, well, we're just trying to go 1-0 every day. We're just trying to do whatever, whatever. Like they're obviously doing that stuff, but like they're like, no, like this is a big year. This is a really big year. We put a lot of time and money and resource into this program and this year, and we got to perform. And so the thing that everybody said is like our goal is to get to Arlington and play for the Big 12. They acknowledge, look, if you get there, like it's a football game. Anything can happen at that point, and you'll probably be playing one of those other best teams in the conference. Arizona State, Baylor, Kansas State, one of those teams. So like, it's not just that they have to win, but they feel like they have to get there, and they have to be slotted into the playoff heading into the final weeks of the season, right? They have to have a chance to be there. So I think they will. Our picks for each conference are going to come out next week over at cbssports.com, but I will give a sneak preview and say that I do pick Texas Tech to win the Big 12. But it's going to be really competitive. I see in the Big 12, I view there as being a top tier of the conference. Texas Tech, Baylor, Arizona State, Kansas State is kind of my top tier, with Utah and TCU kind of like right on the cusp of getting there. And there are still 9 teams in the conference that I think have a chance to win the league if some things break right for them. But right now, at least, I think that Texas Tech has eliminated as many of the variables as any team in college football, and that's going to give them a chance to be really good.
I just want to play a little bit of devil's advocate because they come into this season ranked 23rd in the preseason AP poll. You touched on there the expectations that they're not shying away from because of everything that's going on around that program. I've for maybe a season or two kind of felt like there has been that expectation that Texas Tech should be doing something since Jerry Maguire was there, like arrived really. Good recruiting classes, attracting guys that traditionally they wouldn't have. Are we looking at pure hype right now that maybe carries a little bit of pressure as well? This is the season that they have to perform. If they don't get to the 10 wins, if they don't get to Arlington, if they don't challenge for a title, is that where people start looking at, does something need to change?
Oh yeah, and I talked to Joey McGuire specifically, and I asked him to his face. I'm like, if you just keep winning 8 games every year, like they'll build a statue of you. You'll get to coach here for 10 years, right? Like everybody will love you because that like again, you don't think of Texas Tech as one of these programs. Texas Tech is one of these programs that has not had consistent success almost at any point in their history. Like they just haven't. Spike Dykes, who actually is the father of Sonny Dykes, who's the head coach at TCU now. He was a great coach for them in the 80s and 90s, and he won like under 60% of his games. Like it just doesn't happen there. And in fact, you mentioned obviously some of the undelivered expectations. I mean, Joe McGuire is the first coach since the Southwest Conference folded in 1995 to have 3 straight winning records in conference play at Texas Tech. Like, that's the level we're talking about here, right? Like, when we talk about this program. So, no, they absolutely turned the burner up on themselves. They absolutely turned the pressure up on themselves. Um, and they readily acknowledge it and say it. Now, look, if they go 8-4 this year, it will be to me a huge disappointment. I also think that uh short of again, if Joey Maguire goes out there and costs some games, yeah, that's a conversation, right? But like I think that he's part of the plan too. When you talk about Cody Campbell and when you talk about their athletic director and their general manager, like I don't think that this is just a thing that happens if anybody's the head coach here. I think that Cody Campbell believes a lot in Joey Maguire. And so, but all that said, I mean, if it's a disaster, like I made the comparison, I think, in the piece to last year, Kansas State men's basketball kind of did a giant NIL swing, and it was a total disaster, like total disaster. They missed the tournament and finished below 500. And like, so a guy in Jerome Tang who was super popular there is now kind of like persona non grata, right? Like it can change that fast. And so they're going to have to maneuver this well. And again, like this is probably the best chance they're ever going to have because if they do go 8-4, it would be an okay season. But there's a reason we're talking about 2006 Cedar Hill High School, right? It's because that's the season that changed everything. That's what this needs to be.
And I guess from the fans' perspective, we saw what happened when Mike Leach was released from the program. I mean, there was protestation about, and Mike hadn't taken them to that point. I think there was a general expectation that he was on the road to success with the program. So we've got precedent about how much the fans will get behind a coach that they see as heading in the right direction. And as the whole context of this conversation is that it's a very exciting time to be in Lubbock. So I guess from that perspective, the expectations really do ramp up, whether they like it or not.
No, 100%. And I think that like I'll say this too, right? Like not to get too, anthropological or whatever you want to say, but like I think that, when you look at that place at this time in history, like Joey Maguire showed up at the perfect time because Joey Maguire is a fighter and is a cheerleader. He's somebody who is willing to represent that community fervently, who's willing to come in and say, you guys are worth it. You guys are big time. This is where I want to be. Their previous staff and their previous head coach, Matt Wells, who I think is a great guy, but like I think for him, he thought I could just put my head down and coach football. Well, no, like you have to be the governor of West Texas. That's what the job at Texas Tech is. And ironically, I think that a high school football coach was kind of the perfect guy who gets that because high school football at the highest level is like your own little fiefdom too. Like it is like you are the mayor of your town and you need to not just coach football well, you need to be out shaking hands and kissing babies, right? It's like and so I think that they really understand that piece of it. They understand what's on the line and this was a huge part of the genesis of the article in general is I think that there was a very good but very lazy story that could be told of, hey, look at all the players that Texas Tech is paying. And I thought that there was more there to it of, okay, well, like, why is this happening right now? Why, who are these people and why are they putting so much investment in that could never be returned? And, luckily, I think it really turned into a fascinating study.
I just want to finish off with a Texas Tech rival and a program that is close to you, close to your heart, close to your origin story, if you like, and a team that is. We're talking about expectations around Texas Tech, a team that I think, and I think you agree, has been woefully underrated and going into the 2025 college football season. And that's the Baylor Bears, a team that returns arguably one of the best trio of offensive players in the country. But he's outside the AP top 25 as we go in. Talk to me a little bit, Sharon, about your thoughts, feelings about Baylor football in 2025.
Well, I think that heading into the offseason, my thought was their season is going to be made by how many of their offensive coordinator, Jake Spavital, quarterback Sawyer Robertson, and running back Bryson Washington come back. If they return two of those guys, they have a chance to be a pretty good team. If they return one, big step back. Well, they returned all three. And frankly, I don't know that I expected them to return all three because there were calls to Spavital and Robertson, and I can tell you, Sawyer Robertson, who in my opinion is a top two quarterback in the Big 12, uh, is not paid like a top two quarterback in the Big 12. He took a lesser contract so that they'd be able to bring back some other guys as part of this team. And so when you look at this group, I mean, this should be one of the best offenses in the conference. Sawyer, again, a top two quarterback. I think Bryson is, to me, maybe clearly the number one running back heading into the year. There's some other guys who will get in the conversation, I think, as the year goes on, but he heading in, I think, is clear running back one. Josh Cameron at receiver is a former non-scholarship player who really showed out. He's a big-bodied guy, long arms, great hands. They've got a tight end in Michael Trigg who really came along in the second half of the year. Four starters back on the offensive line, but the thing that I haven't mentioned is the defense, and that's kind of the thing that has to take that step forward. They really struggled in the secondary, but they brought in a fantastic secondary coach in Paul Gonzalez, who is the guy at TCU who developed two Thorpe Award winners in Trey Hodges-Tomlinson and Trayvon Merrick. So a lot, I think, to be excited about with this team. Again, I hinted that Baylor is my number, or sorry, that Texas Tech is my number one in the Big 12. I have them playing Baylor in the Big 12 title game, which, by the way, these two teams have played every year since like 1970, and they're not on each other's schedule this year. So I think it would only be fitting for them to get a chance to play once again in Arlington.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. That would be an interesting Big 12 championship game. Listen, Sean, that's all the time that we've got, and we really do appreciate you coming on. Normally at this time in the show, we ask our guests what they're up to and what our listeners can watch out for. And without preempting what you're going to say, I saw that you started a brand new podcast show yesterday. So let's hear what you're up to and what we can watch out for in the next few weeks.
Yeah, we just, like you mentioned, on Monday launched a new podcast over at CBS Sports called the College Football Insiders. I feel like we have as good a team right now at CBS Sports as anybody in the industry, and all six of us are part of the show. It's a rotating cast of guys, and we'll be going three times a week during the regular season. But the show is what it sounds like. It's us getting together and talking about what we're hearing, and whether it's news and notes from camp, whether it's insight into some of the biggest storylines. I'll tell you what, we'll get a chance to talk about the whole situation with Oklahoma's quarterback on tomorrow's show, which is at 2 p.m. Eastern time in America. So we're streaming it live on YouTube. You can also get it anywhere you get your podcasts, and you can find all my other work as usual over at cbssports.com and on my social media feeds at Shehan Jeyarajah on every platform.
Well, that's awesome. We'll watch out for that. That's all from us. Thanks for listening and supporting us. Stay safe and well, and catch you.